This is another earth element problem in Kier. Okay, so next is the diaphragm. The diaphragm causes a lot of problems. A lot of people don't even know what the diaphragm is, but it's the breathing muscle. It's the main muscle that we breathe with. The nerve that goes to it is the phrenic nerve, and it covers it goes all the way across the thorax. It's like a cross section through the whole body. And in the front, it attaches to the rib cage, the anterior crest of the rib cage. The fibers from there billow up like a parachute, and then they come down the back and form into what we call crusts. And the crusts of the diaphragm are in the back, and they attach to the lumbar vertebra. The top 2 lumbar vertebrae on the left and the top 3 lumbar vertebrae on the right. It has to have an even contraction for the heart, so it can't go as high up on the heart, so it can't go down as low. So the middle of the contraction is the same on left to the right side. So that's where the diaphragm is. The esophagus goes through a hole in the diaphragm. The hole is called the esophageal hiatus. Below the esophageal hiatus is the stomach. So that's where the esophagus meets the stomach. There's a valve there that keeps acid from backing up and coming up out of the stomach into the esophagus, right? But if the diaphragm's tight, it pulls the hole that the esophagus goes through back towards the spine. And also if it's an uneven spasm, so the diaphragm can spasm on the left or the right. So if it spasms on the left or the right, it actually will pull the esophagus to the left or the right. And it pulls the aorta with the heart on top of it to the left or the right. So a diaphragm spasm can be really hard on your health, causing high blood pressure, nausea, and even vomiting. So definitely all acid reflux is from a spasm of the diaphragm. So to release the diaphragm, all you have to do is you have to push back up into the diaphragm. So what you do is you find the xiphoid process. You always want to watch out for that. Never put pressure on the xiphoid process, which is the bottom of the sternum. It's like a little tailbone of the sternum. So to release the diaphragm, you have to come below that and then use enough pressure to drop into the abdomen. Relax, relax. And then once you clear the xiphoid process, relax, relax. Let it go. Keep your breathing going. You try to slowly push your pressure under the sternum and get into the diaphragm. So I'm pretty much there. And if I slowly back my pressure out now, I'm going to go ahead and try to trigger a release. Yin energy. You start getting a release in the diaphragm. It starts getting easier to breathe. This is a really key technique for people that have had COVID also, because it frees up, all the stuck spots between the lung and the diaphragm. And if you release the diaphragm right through here, right under the xiphoid process, this is the way to fix any form of acid reflux. Feels good, huh? Feel it?
Yeah. I feel like I can breathe deeper when you do it.
Right.
When it's released.
And it really helps athletic stuff. I mean, think if you're like a runner or something and you do this.
Yeah, the first time you released it, I felt like I could grab that last sip of air in yoga. I could never feel I could grab it.
Exactly. It makes all the difference in the world. It allows full lung capacity. So.
Yes, exactly. Which just can be life-changing.
Yes, and most of us have a little bit of restricted lung capacity because the diaphragm is in spasm. It's like almost everybody has a little bit. So, acid reflux. Okay, I should also talk about the spleen. Because the diaphragm, it can, there's different sections of the diaphragm. The central sections here, right under the xiphoid process, that's for the stomach and for acid reflux. Oh. But the liver and the gallbladder and the spleen and the pancreas also are compressed by the diaphragm when it's in spasm. So over here is where the spleen is. Now there's an interesting thing about the spleen, I should say, that the spleen, it holds about 20% of the body's volume of blood is stored in the spleen. Mm-hmm. And the blood cells, baby blood cells that come out of the bone marrow, and migrate through your bloodstream into your spleen. And they're like babies, baby blood cells. So they go to the spleen to grow up. So that's where like all kinds of culturing of the blood cells, that's where they decide what kind of blood cell they're going to be, happens in the spleen. And stem cells come from the spleen.
So what does Releasology do to help?
Well, when you release the diaphragm around the spleen, it opens up the flow of stem cells to the body. So like, if we cut ourselves or something, it's going to form scar tissue unless we can get enough stem cells out there to replace the cells that were damaged, and then they become whatever kind of cell it's replacing. So you can actually get skin cells to grow back if you can get stem cells out to the skin or to muscle tissue or any other kind of tissue. And where do they come from? They come from here, from the spleen. So if the abdominal muscles are tight, the external oblique and the internal oblique are the main ones. If they're in spasm around the spleen won't be able to, the stem cells won't be able to migrate out of the spleen into the body. It'll slow it down. So that's the way to actually speed up like how fast your body heals. It's by keeping it released around the spleen. Let's see. So that's pretty much everything with the diaphragm.